So what is it that Rick Rubin actually does? He can't play an instrument, he doesn't know music theory, he knows nothing about engineering, and he knows pretty much nothing about the technical side of producing a record. However, the biggest artists on the planet constantly are using Rick Rubin again and again on their massive albums and musical projects. Rick Rubin has done interviews where he's been asked, what is it that you do? And he never really has an answer. He doesn't beat around the bush with the question. He just doesn't really know. Now, the point of this video is to pinpoint what it is that Rick Rubin does. I don't know if Rick Rubin knows what he does, but I know that I know what Rick Rubin does. And we're going to get to the bottom of whether or not Rick Rubin knows what it is that Rick Rubin does. Because there is a very loose occult and esoteric side of what it is that he does. And this is sort of the approach that he takes when describing not knowing what it is that he does. But then there is also an insanely in-depth and complex side of what it is that he does that I have spent the last several months painstakingly uncovering, and I am about to unveil to you. But before we do that, we're going to do a couple of things. First, I'm going to give a listening disclaimer. Lately, I have been finding people hitting me up and they really are getting everything I'm saying wrong. And I think that there is so much noise in the world, it's really hard to focus, and listening closely is a very difficult thing to do sometimes. So this is my listen closely disclaimer. Listening closely is a sacred act that requires humility and the willingness to hear beyond the surface. I'm not just speaking in sound bites. I am transmitting a layered, esoteric truth that lives between the words. And when you don't really listen, you are projecting assumptions and missing the deeper meaning of what it is that I am saying. This work is not just casual content. It is intentional, it is deeply coded, and it is meant to activate something within you and to resonate with you. If you are not listening closely, you are going to misunderstand me, and you're going to miss the entire point of what this entire thing is. So please, listen carefully. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Rick Rubin. So Rick Rubin is a legendary music producer known for his minimalist approach and his deep spiritual philosophy towards creativity. He co-founded Def Jam Records in the 1980s and was instrumental in launching hip-hop into the mainstream with artists like LL Cool J, Run DMC, and the Beastie Boys. He later expanded into rock and country, and he's worked with everyone from Johnny Cash and the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Kanye West and Adele. His style involves stripping away excess and guiding artists to access their most authentic emotional core. Rubin is often described as a guru or a creative shaman, helping musicians tune into the source rather than simply craft hits. He rarely touches deeply influent. He doesn't touch instruments, he doesn't touch computers, but he is instead focused on his presence, energy, and intention within the studio. And how we're going to answer what it is that Rick Rubin does is from his book, A Creative Act, A Way of Being. I have read this book and I have painstakingly figured out what it is that Rick Rubin does. Rick Rubin sees the artist as a vessel, one that is essentially an antenna that is receiving and not forcing art to projectile out of them. He is attempting to get the artist to channel universal truth. And the truth is something that resonates along a frequency. When someone's lying to you, you can just tell. You know when someone's lying. Truth resonates. The truth has a certain feeling. And Rick Rubin's legacy does not lie in any one genre, but it lies in the awakening of a divine frequency that's already inside of you, the listener. Rick Rubin's job is to activate the truth in you. And how does he get to that truth? How does he activate that feeling? You could argue that what makes music good is relatability. It is feeling whatever it is the artist is singing. This can be said too for comedy. A lot of stand-up comedians' best jokes are ones where you think, oh, I've experienced that before. That is what Rick Rubin is trying to do. And as I said, I have painstakingly gone through and figured out each esoteric step that he goes through to actually do this. What Rick Rubin talks about in this book is tapping into source. And as I said, he views you as an antenna. He wants to get to the unconscious realm of the human psyche where truth resonates and lies. We are going to break down the creative act, a way of being, in two different ways. We're going to do an esoteric breakdown in a broad sense, and then we're going to do an esoteric breakdown in a much more narrow sense. And we're going to find out step by step how Rick Rubin gets to the source. Now, the first thing that Rick Rubin does in his book is he talks about emptying out yourself daily. And the reason you do this is to create space for ideas to emerge, or rather for you to tap into ideas. And when you're emptying yourself out, it's not because some idea is going to generate within you. It's because you are literally going to be tapping into an idea that exists in a realm outside of yourself. Now, in order to understand that, we need to understand the occult philosophies that are embedded within the creative act, a way of being. This book is steeped in occult philosophy, and although it's not labeled as such, and he never name drops any occultists, if you know, you know, and you know who he's referencing. And as we break this down and get further into it, I'm going to break down exactly who he's quoting where and how these occultists are littered throughout this book. Make no mistake, this is an occult text. And one of the first things that he talks about is to empty yourself. Now, this relates to an Eastern philosophy called the Tao, and we'll get into that a bit more in a moment. But when you're emptying yourself out, it's not because Rubin believes that you can generate an idea from this emptiness. It's because Rubin is thinking that you are literally going to pull ideas out of the ether. You're going to be pulling ideas from source. And to understand what that means by pulling ideas from source, we need to understand the most fundamental and rudimentary basic philosophy of the occult, which is as above, so below. This is a hermetic principle, and it is something that he echoes constantly throughout this text. One quote being, "The universe is a creative act." One quote being, "The universe is a creative act. The same force that created the stars and planets is available to you." This parallels the hermetic idea that the macrocosm, the divine realm, reflects the microcosm of human creativity, and that creativity becomes an act of cosmic mirroring. The things you are creating is just a mirroring of the universe itself. It's very similar to the idea that consciousness is the universe observing itself. And this is what as above, so below means. It means what is within me is also outside of me, and everything is a mirrored inversion of itself. Now, what does it mean to pull something from source into you? Well, now that we understand that creativity to Rick Rubin is a mirroring, and that it echoes this as above, so below principle of the occult, we have to understand that there is a Platonic realm of forms that exists all around us. Now, the realm of forms goes back to Socrates and Plato, and the idea is that there is an idealized version of everything that exists within a metaphysical realm. If you can think of a tree right now, that tree that you can think of does not actually exist, but it does exist in this metaphysical realm of forms. It's not an actual real material tree. Now, this realm of forms is the realm that source exists in that we can pull ideas from. Now, this term is used almost identically in the Kybalion, Kabbalah, and the Vedic astrology mystical systems. Rubin is quoted as saying, "Ideas are not yours. They exist in the other. We just tune in." And again, this mirrors the as above, so below principle. The ideas are not ours. We are grabbing them, borrowing them, and giving them back. And this is the belief that there is a collective wellspring of ideas, a cosmic consciousness. And this is straight out of Hermetic monism and Jungian occultism. Jung refers to this as the collective unconscious. And we're going to get a lot into Jung in this. So if you're not a fan of Jung, if you don't know who he is, you're going to get to know him, especially in the other parts of this series. The next thing we're going to be talking about is magical receptivity and the artist as a channel or an antenna. Rather than controlling this artistic process and generating ourselves, Rubin emphasizes that there is a ritual preparation that comes from clearing the space within and receiving inspiration like a magician that is invoking a spirit, or a prophet receiving divine gnosis from above. Think of it as literally a beam stream of knowledge being downloaded into your consciousness, and you are reflecting that out. You're an antenna receiving word from the cosmic consciousness that he calls source. And Rubin says we are not the creators, we are the receivers of creation. And this mirrors a ton of different occult practices and ideologies, mainly Thelema, as well as types of shamanism, which is something Rick Rubin is often called a shaman. Now, this also taps into the sacred fool archetype, which is something I'm going to break down in depth, like super in depth, in the narrow breakdown of Rubin's book. Next, we're going to get a little bit into Kabbalah. Now, don't get nervous. We're not practicing magic here. I'm just explaining concepts that exist within Kabbalah. And the first one is the creative contraction, also known as the Zimtzum. And within Kabbalah, what happens is God contracts himself to create a space for the world. And again, we see the theme of creating space. Rubin says you need to empty yourself in order to receive this channel. Now, within Kabbalah, the same sort of idea. And God creates space within himself to make room for the world. And Rubin says that sometimes doing less creates more space for magic to appear. And Rubin encourages the artist to take a step back, to empty and to subtract and clear your mind, and to allow creative light to filter into your vessel. Creating this space within us, again, is tapping into the as above, so below principle and the mirroring of everything. Because within this Cabalistic vessel theory, the theory posits that before creation, the infinite divine light filled all of existence. And to create space for the world, God had to create a void within himself and perform this contraction. And Rubin believes we need to do the same thing. And this is also mirrored over in the Tao. Now, this is something I learned in philosophy discourse in college that I always thought was extremely profound. My professor said, a bowl is not the physical material object of a bowl. A bowl is that creates space for things to be held within. Now, this is exactly how Rubin sees us. We are these vessels for channeling source and emitting that divine light out into reality as our art. Now, the next concept that is constantly seen throughout Rubin's book is alchemy, which is the transformation through process. His entire book is about inner transformation through the fire of the creative act. Now, this gets into the 4 key parts of the process of what is called the great work within alchemy. And this is a type of spiritual alchemy, which refers to the negretto, which is the emptiness. Essentially, when you don't know what to make and you're making that empty space for you to channel whatever it is within you. Once you have created that emptiness, you then tap into the albedo, which is when clarity about what it is that you want to create emerges. Next is the citrinus, which would refer to a sort of consciousness coming about from this emptiness and this reflection, and you begin to start creating. You begin to start making this divine light that we saw in this previous step, where I referenced the Kabbalistic vessel theory of Zimtzum. You are now creating that light. And finally, you have the rubido, which would be the final illuminated work. And in this final illuminated work, now through this, we have refined a part of our soul alchemically, and we have furthered ourselves into the becoming of ourself in the alchemical concept of the great work. Now, the alchemical concept of the great work, I talked about a ton in a previous video about the rebus. That's something else. Next, we have the Tao, the stillness, and the Eastern mysticism of the creative act. Much of Rubin's esoteric view is Eastern adjacent, and it really borrows heavily from these Eastern ideas that often can sort of be at conflict with Western occultic philosophies. But 3 of the main things is silence being a ritual. This is exactly how we are able to be emptied out in this silence. If we picture the source and this cosmic consciousness as being a pool full of infinite ideas, we have to be still and silent in order to be receptive to receive these ideas and to receive the universe. Next is being in the now. This is the Taoist idea of the Wu Wei, which is effortless action. And finally, we have to have disidentification with the ego, which is essential in both Buddhism and ceremonial magic. We also see this in Thelema and in Crowley's teachings. And Rubin says it's not about making something, it's about being someone who can receive. And that's not advice on being productive and being creative. That's advice on how to initiate something and how to be a part of an initiation. And finally, what we see is the fool and the trickster archetype. And this is something that Rubin himself sort of emotes constantly. Rubin's own role is similar to the fool within the tarot. He disrupts expectations, he sits on the margins, and he opens up new worlds by not playing by the rules. He doesn't play instruments, he doesn't engineer, he's not in Ableton. He encourages artists to embrace the chaos and absurdity of the universe and of the unconscious, and to take risks. One example that I always think of when I think about Rick Rubin is the beginning of Jay-Z's song 99 Problems. It says, "If you haven't girl problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one." Now, the beat originally was just thumping under those words. Rick Rubin was like, no, do it a cappella. Everyone has a problem. A lot of people have bitch problems, but not Jay-Z. And that is the risk and the sort of foolish nature that Rick Rubin brings along with his aesthetic philosophy. And in this way, Rick Rubin's book is essentially a ritual manual. The creative work is a ritual magic. You creating in this way is a part of a ritual. You, as the artist, are the vessel. You are the magician. And the source of all of this is the divine all. It's the universe. You are creating and performing this magic ritual in silence as your altar. Your process of creating is the initiation, and doubt is your ego coming in and telling you what the universe should or shouldn't be. And the result of this work of creating is in of itself a alchemical transmutation of the self. You have changed by working on this piece. You have changed by allowing something within you to create. You're not the one creating. You're allowing the universe to create through you, according to Rubin. He doesn't need Baphomet. He doesn't need Alistair Crowley. This is the great work that is being done through creation. So that, in part, answers what is it that Rick Rubin does? He gives artists the space to figure out how and what to create by awakening the divine frequency that's already inside of them. It's already there, and it's already there outside of us, because as above, so below states it has to be mirrored. But of course, this only answers what it is that Rick Rubin does in a broad sense. There is a much more narrowed and nuanced sense to this, and we're gonna look at this a lot closer. And this is where that careful listening needs to come into play, because what I'm about to break down to you next is going to blow your fucking mind. If you're an artist, it's going to change the way you create. If you're not an artist, it's going to change your mind and make you want to become one. And if you are simply somebody that is entertained by art, it will change the way that you interpret it. Now, to get a really good grasp of what Rick Rubin is trying to do with his book, we need to look at an interesting character from the 1800s named Franz Hartmann. Franz was not only a doctor, astrologer, and an author, but he was also an occultist and a geomancer, and he was a close associate of famed theosophist and occultist Helena Blavatsky. In fact, Franz was the chairman of the board of control of the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, and he's been described as one of the most important philosophical writers of his time, and really of all time. He has written various books that have been insanely influential throughout today's modern occult. His books are so influential, I found them in the library of Rick Rubin. And if you have ever listened to a song that Rick Rubin has produced, you are aware of the occult teachings of Franz Hartmann, whether you know it or not. Now, this is where I really want to begin focusing on something I have said several times in the past. If you know where something is from, you get a better understanding of where it might be trying to take you. The writings of Franz Hartmann are so insanely influential that they have influenced and shaped Rick Rubin's aesthetic philosophy and the way he produces records for the artists that we all listen to. Now, where might this be trying to take us? Now, what if I told you that Franz Hartmann joined and supported the far-right esotericists Guido van List Society, which was a modern pagan new religious movement that promoted Wotanism, which is a proposed revival of the ancient religion of Germany, which claimed that it was going to be the revival of the religion of the ancient German race, which included an inner set of Ariosophical teachings that he termed Armanism, otherwise known as the occult roots of Nazism. This is where we get the idea of Aryan esoteric themes and the pan-Germanic ethno-nationalist movement. This is one of the philosophies that helped to create the Nazi Party and the occult teachings behind their beliefs. Now, am I saying that Rick Rubin is trying to turn people into Nazis? No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. But I do find it interesting that Rick Rubin's book and his aesthetic philosophy is built on the foundations of Franz Hartmann's occultic teachings. But I'm going to be honest, if you want the bottom of this iceberg to be truly uncovered, and you want to know what lies not only within the collective unconscious, but what lies outside of that, you are going to have to go to my Patreon, because here is where I'm going to uncover not only what lies beyond the realm of the unconscious, but who the new Alistair Crowley is, what it is that he does, and where it is that he has been. And it is a he. No, it's not Rick Rubin. And now the reason that I am putting this information on my Patreon is for several reasons. I never intended to even have a YouTube at all. I never wanted a YouTube. I didn't even start posting on YouTube really until about 4 months ago. But Matthew 7:6 says, "Do not give to dogs what is holy. Do not throw your pearls before swine." I'm not calling you swine. I'm not calling anybody anything. But I do think that a lot of this information truly is sacred. And there's a reason this information is not just widely available. The reason that I only posted on Patreon for a year was because I want the people who want this information, who are truly serious about seeking truth, to be the ones that have it. There is a reason why Rick Rubin says he does not know what it is that he does. And I don't want the truth to be treated as something that can and should be trampled underfoot. The truth is sacred, and those that are truly serious about learning it can take the extra steps to obtain it. I do offer free 1-week trials, and there you will find the answers as to who is the new Alistair Crowley and what it is they are doing, because it truly is going to blow your fucking mind. See you there.
Back of the mind, I'm in the back of the car all the time. Perfect time.